Coming up on this episode of Crime Family, another anonymous person that was involved in the documentary says that Christina's case isn't getting solved because there's too many secrets surrounding Hannibal, and that if this case was to get cracked open, then there's just too many secrets that would be revealed about the people and everything that's going on in Hannibal. So it's like this ominous overtone of they can't solve it because of what's going to be revealed if they do. Hey everyone, welcome to Crime Family. I am your host Katie, and I'm here with my siblings, my bro AJ, and my sis Steph.
Cringe. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say that. So today I'm going to talk about the disappearance of a woman named Christina Whittaker. And there is a 6-part docuseries about this case on Discovery Plus, and it's called Relentless. And this documentary was released in the summer of 2021, so it's pretty recent. But it's about a search that goes on for over a decade. This is another one of those cases like Tara Grinstead, where the investigators are being pulled in a multitude of different directions, and everyone has a theory, everyone's lying about something, and everyone has something to hide. So before I get into this, I just want to say that after this documentary came out and was released on Discovery Plus, Christina's mother, her name is Cindy, she was very offended with how she was portrayed, and she's really upset and she's sick about it. She says that she thought the filmmaker, whose name was Christina Fontana, was really trying to help the family, but she says it seems like she just kind of wanted to paint them as the villain. And so as I'm going through this, it's kind of from the filmmaker's perspective. Christina Fontana says that she was really trying to help the family, and she was just expressing throughout the documentary how she felt throughout the years. This went on for 11 years, and she talks about how she was just not happy with some of the things that were happening. She felt like she couldn't trust them a lot of the time, and so that's kind of where all this is coming from. Also, there are people that suggest that a lot of what is in this documentary is sensationalized, and just the way they kind of put it together and the way it's edited, it kind of does make a bigger deal out of some things than they probably were, but it's a fair point. But the whole point of a documentary or putting something on TV is for entertainment of some kind, so you can kind of see why they would do some of those things. And also it is very all over the place at times, so it kind of is hard to follow. There's dates and they go back and forth. It's not represented chronologically at all, so it does feel kind of choppy, but I did try my best to kind of put things together into a cohesive, coherent story. And things will jump back and forth, but I'll try to be clear. Also, some people say that Christina Fontana, so the filmmaker, she was very naive throughout this whole thing, and she was an awful investigator. Why did it take her 11 years to come to the final conclusion that they finally do? She is a filmmaker, she's not a professional investigator. And so I'm just gonna summarize this documentary. There's not a lot of news about this case that has come out since the documentary, and I couldn't find really anything that went back to when this all first started. So anyway, it really is just a summary of this documentary, and so I'll just let you guys kind of be the judge of what's going on throughout this whole case. So now that I got that all out of the way, let's get started. This story begins in a small city called Hannibal, Missouri, and this city has a population of around 17,000. And Hannibal, Missouri used to be a really happening place. It was a good place for kids to grow up. They had nice parks. It's right by the Mississippi River. There's cute little downtown storefronts. It was things like that. And it was known as America's hometown. And Mark Twain, the author, actually lived there when he was growing up. And there's a museum and a monument and stuff there for Mark Twain. So the economy of Hannibal started to disintegrate when the agriculture sector went from like little family-owned operations to big corporate productions. And there was a Walmart that was built in town, so all the local businesses were affected because of that. So that was just kind of the decline of the city and where it is today. A lot of people living in poverty, and there's lots of violence. And so it's plagued now with gangs, violence, corruption. It's run down. There's condemned buildings, boarded up shops. Drugs are a huge problem, prostitution, murder, that kind of thing. So throughout this documentary, it suggests that a lot of the people in Hannibal know what's going on and that there's a lot of secrets. And it's just understood that, people go missing and are murdered in Hannibal. And apparently a lot of people are thrown in the Mississippi River just to never be seen again. And like the town has secrets and everyone is hiding something, or they're too scared to tell anybody because they don't know who's on the inside, who's on the outside. And it's also understood just how far some of these people will go to continue to live that way. And they're implying that they will not let anyone get in the way of the lifestyle that they've come accustomed to. So, there's a lot of dangerous things happening in this little town, or this little city. So, although this documentary kind of portrays Hannibal as this rundown, like, corrupt town, obviously, just like any other town, it's full of, like, families, and not everybody in the town is corrupt or a bad person. So I just want to put it out there that although it kind of seems like we're hating on this town, it really is just kind of what is being portrayed. And so there's probably some aspects of the town that are great. That's why people stay there and have families. So yeah. So the filmmaker who made this documentary, like I said before, her name is Christina Fontana, but I'm just going to call her Fontana throughout so we don't get her confused with Christina Whittaker, who is actually the subject of this case. Fontana, she first heard about the Christina Whittaker case when she was starting to film a documentary about missing people and their families. She got onto the subject when her friend told her a story about how her brother went missing, and her family felt like the police, just really could not care less. Her friend and the family were looking for him, and they got a tip or something about remains that had been found. And when they told the police about it, the police were kind of just like, okay, yeah, you can go check it out on your own. And Fontana says that she'll never get over hearing from her friend the feeling of holding her own brother's bones in her hand, because, they had gone and searched and they found the remains, and it turned out to be him. And this woman had to do that, like, not law enforcement, it was her that had to go find her brother. And so Fontana was just determined to help out other families of missing people that felt the police had abandoned them. And so she met Christina's mother, Cindy Young, 9 months after Christina Whittaker went missing. And she says that she was just inspired by how determined Cindy was to find her daughter. And Christina went missing November 13th of 2009. And she was only 21 when she disappeared. And so on the 1-year anniversary of Christina's disappearance, this is when Fontana starts documenting the search, which is what this whole documentary is made up of. It's footage of her investigation. So Cindy told Fontana that she believes that Christina is still alive and that they have narrowed down her whereabouts to just a 20-mile radius, but they just can't find her. And so Fontana feels like this seems like, a promising case, and she wanted to help, and she promised that she would not give up until Christina was found. And she said that not knowing the road that she was about to go down. So at the beginning of this documentary series, Fontana is with Christina's parents, Cindy, and Christina's stepfather, Alex, who raised Christina since she was 2. And Fontana is just trying to get to know Christina a little bit. Christina had a daughter named Alexandria before she disappeared, and her daughter was only 6 months old when she disappeared, and now her daughter was living with Cindy and Alex. So people say that Christina was a loving person. She loved her daughter, she loved her nephew, she loved singing and dancing, and she loved animals. She had a great personality, but she struggled with mental health and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at age 17. One of her good friends says that Christina talked a lot about suicide, but her friend would always be like, no, you can't do that. Like, we have to go to college, we have to graduate so we can get out of this town together. And her mom says that Christina would call her up to 15 times a day just due to her anxiety issues, and she just kind of needed that constant contact. So on the night that Christina went missing, she was staying at Cindy and Alex's house, so her parents' house, while they were out of town, and she decided to go out for a bit with some friends. And one friend in particular that she was out with was a woman who went by the nickname Breezy. So she was only supposed to go out for a few hours and then come home, and her mom said before she left that night, like she was talking to her on the phone, and she had a bad feeling, and she was just telling her to stay in that night, and that she would be home the next night, and then she could go out tomorrow night. But Christina was like, no, I'm only going to be gone for a few hours. So she did go out to the bar with her friends that night. Christina's boyfriend named Travis took her to the bar that night, but he didn't stay with them, and Christina never came back. So the bartender at one of the bars that night knew Christina, and so she saw her at the bar with her friends, and she said that there was some guy buying them shots all night. Christina's mother claims at the time that Christina was never a heavy drinker, so she would have been very intoxicated from doing shots all night. The bartender said that Christina started to get really belligerent towards her, and so they asked Christina to leave, and Christina put up a fight, and so the bartender and her boss grabbed her and walked her to the back door. She ran back in, but then they walked her back to the door, and then the bouncer said that there was at least one guy that came up and grabbed her, and that just kind of grabbed her, and then they all left together. And he said this was a black male, but that's all he could remember about him. So Travis says that Christina did call him that night around 10:30 just to check in, but she didn't say what time she would be home, and there was really no indication that anything was wrong or that anybody should be alarmed at this point. Like, she just called to see what was going on. So throughout that night, she got kicked out of at least 2 bars, maybe 2 or 3 bars, and by the time she got to the last bar, she was arguing on the phone with somebody, as the bartender recalls. Now, the bartender at this bar also knew Christina, and she was trying to look out for her, and she was going to call her a cab just so she could go home, because she was obviously very intoxicated. But before that happened, Christina kind of just left out the back door, and that was the last time that she was seen. Now, Christina's parents knew something was really wrong by noon the next day, when she hadn't called them at all to check in. And Travis also tells them that she hadn't come home or reached out to him again either. And so that's when they notified the police. And that same morning, a man named Danny said that he had found Christina's phone on the ground that morning around 7 a.m. He picked it up and was looking through it, I guess. And he figured out it was Christina's because he knew Christina as well. And so he dropped the phone off at Christina's aunt's house a couple hours later. And then Travis goes to get the phone, so he has it by 5:30 that night. And then Christina's mom, Cindy, gets it. And then finally the police request it a couple days later. So this phone has exchanged hands a bunch of times before the police have it. So who knows what could have gone on with that phone within that time. So despite how violent the city can be, apparently the police don't want to deal with a case like this. Christina's stepfather, Alex, says that if it's not a speeding ticket or somebody ran a red light, then the police don't want to do anything with it. And they really don't have the manpower, because they don't even have detectives that work on the weekend, or at least they didn't back then. So apparently right where her phone was found, there was a hit and run that took place that same night. Somebody hit a parked car and took off, and that's where her phone was found, and there was red paint that was scratched into the car that was still sitting there. But the police didn't seem too concerned about it or feel the need or the want to connect those two incidences. Christina's mom was handing out flyers all over the place when Christina first disappeared, and she said that the word on the street was that there was a guy named Darcy Morris who went by the name Bookie, that he took Christina to sell her into prostitution. And this Bookie guy, he was a real treat. He had been charged with multiple counts of physical and sexual abuse. Prior to this, 22 days after her disappearance, the police questioned him, and he's in jail at the time that he was interviewed, but he says that he was with his wife the night Christina disappeared, and his wife corroborates that. Now, Darcy is a black male, so that fits with what the bouncer had said that night when he saw her leaving with a black male. So across the border from Missouri is Illinois, and in Illinois there's a city called Peoria, and it's about 150 miles from the border of Hannibal. And so a lot of this investigation has to do with Peoria as well, and Peoria is reportedly one of the most dangerous cities in all of the US. It has become a hub for sex trafficking, and it has more violent crime than Chicago or Washington, D.C., if that means anything. I don't know how violent those cities are. About 25 days after Christina went missing, there was an apparent sighting of her in Peoria at a cafe. She was upset and she had asked to use the phone, but she quickly left before she got a chance to. Now, Cindy claims that she feels that Christina was taken, probably by Bookie, and given drugs to control her. She says that Christina never did drugs and was taken to Peoria to get her into prostitution to make money off her. And so this is where Cindy thinks her daughter is being held against her will, somewhere in Peoria. And she says that she gets restricted calls sometimes, and someone just stays on the line but doesn't say anything before they hang up. And Cindy thinks it's Christina calling her, but she's too scared to say anything, or she's brainwashed and she can't get home. And so all of this has happened pretty soon after her disappearance, but fast forward to 1 year after, this is when Fontana gets involved. Cindy says that she's called the police, she's called the sheriff, she's called the FBI multiple times, and no one will ever call her back. And she leaves messages and they all go unanswered. So in the documentary, Fontana is with Cindy, and you can see how much Cindy wants to find Christina. Like, she cries when she talks about her. She's always trying to find her. She's constantly talking about all the efforts that they've put in to try and find her. And it's kind of just become her entire life. They're staking out a spot in town because Cindy said that she got a tip that someone had seen Christina eating lunch at this specific cafe a few times. That's kind of what like Cindy's life is. She gets these tips and then she goes follows up on them herself to try and see if she can find Christina. And she's talking about how they used to live in a good sized house, but now they moved into an RV, and they had sold almost everything to try and pay for all the searches that they've conducted for Christina. And they talk about fundraisers that they've had so that they were able to hire a private detective to help them as well. And this private detective's name is Bill. So at first, Bill, he says all the information that he has gotten about Christina had first come from Christina's parents. And so he met with the lieutenant in charge of the investigation, and the police kind of wanted to know everything that Bill knew, but they wouldn't disclose anything about the case to Bill. And Bill said this was really unusual because usually it's like a two-way street with that kind of thing. Like, everyone tries to help each other out, but that wasn't the case in this case. And so law enforcement really does not want anything to do with this case. Or that's just how it's portrayed in this documentary anyway. Fontana says that she has reached out to the police departments a few times and has never gotten a call back from anyone. So because Cindy is so involved and the police allegedly are not, Cindy gets calls with leads, like all the time, from people saying that they think they know who Christina is or they've seen her. And so she gets a call this one time, and someone that thinks they know Christina, and they want Cindy to listen in on a phone call and see if they can identify her voice. So Cindy always gets really hopeful. She's listening in on this call, but Cindy decides that that's not Christina on the other end of the line. And Fontana says at the beginning, like, Cindy would call her all the time because she would call her whenever she would get a lead like this, or like a new lead that was promising. And then Fontana would jump on a plane because she's in Los Angeles, California. She would jump on a plane and go to Peoria and try to follow up on all these leads, but every time she would get there, the source of the lead was like nowhere to be found. They just would lose contact before Fontana could ever meet any of them.
Like, what kind of leads were they? Like calls or?
Yeah, so I'll go into some of them because there would be these missing posters out, and some people would say they seen her on the streets, like there's these drug houses, and they would seen her like coming and going. And so, or they'd seen her at a cafe, and so Cindy would just go out and go to those places and see if she could see her walking down the street, like that kind of thing. So they get these kinds of calls all throughout 2011, 2012, and Fontana starts to get suspicious because there's times when people claim that they know Christina, and they tell Cindy that they didn't even know that she was looking for her, but now that they do know, they won't contact her anymore, or they won't tell her where she is now. So it's like that kind of thing going on. And the police speak up, not in the documentary, but they talk about the police saying that they can't follow up on any of these leads either because they don't know who these people are. Like, there's apparent witnesses, but there's no way to follow up with them. So nothing ever goes anywhere because nobody, will be consistent and follow through with anything. So this goes on for like years. There's like years of these kind of things, like false hope for the family. One of these instances in particular happened on July 14th of 2012. Cindy is in the car with the cameraman filming, and she gets a call from her nephew, and she puts it on speakerphone, and they're talking to him, and he had gotten like a recycled phone, somebody's old phone from somewhere, and they didn't clear it out, and there's a text on that phone that reads, like, he reads it out loud, and it says, quote, "It's been long enough. We need to get Miss Christina out of the basement," end quote. And so it just so happens that somebody in Cindy's family received this recycled phone with this text still on it, and then they forward it to Christina's nephew, or they forward it to Christina's mother. It's kind of messy, but anyway. And then this guy says that he took it to the cops, and the cops took a picture of the text. And Cindy was like, "Oh yeah, like I already knew she was being held in the basement when she was first taken. Like that was something that she already knew." And so they show the text on camera, and it actually says, quote, "Hide the body in the basement, Christina basement," end quote. So Fontana confesses after like 2.5 years of working on this case, she's starting to not believe everything that Cindy is saying is true. Like all of this info that she is getting is coming through Cindy first. So it's like this filter of Cindy's version of what's actually happening. And Fontana told the PI Bill about this text message, and he had no idea about it. Like Cindy hadn't told him, and he's skeptical when Fontana tells him. And he says that the police just taking a picture of the text is kind of strange. Like, why would they not seize the phone for evidence if it was something that serious? And so, yeah, they're starting to think that Cindy and Alex are just looking for attention. And Bill also says that right before he started talking to Fontana, Cindy was like, "Don't tell her that Christina was taken because of a drug debt," as a theory that some people have. And then so Fontana's like, "Oh, so Christina was into drugs," and Bill's like, "Oh yeah, like everybody knows that." And then Bill said that Cindy didn't want Fontana to know that Christina had a drug problem, and like I said before, like Cindy told her that Christina wasn't into drugs at all. And so this drug debt, that's like just a theory, but it seems like a pretty important detail that Christina was into drugs. Like, why wouldn't Cindy tell Fontana about all of this? And apparently it comes out that Christina had been actually banned from bars in town because she would get really drunk and violent, and she would do like coke and meth in the bathroom. And so she got banned from coming into these bars. So she had a problem, and her mother, it seems like, was trying to hide this from Fontana. Christina was on like a whole list of medications as well for her mental issues, and she had stopped taking them when she had her baby. And she was trying to figure them out because they didn't make her feel right. So she was trying to get like different dosages or maybe different medications. She was trying to find a new doctor to help her. And she had even checked herself into a mental health facility to try and get help. And she also allegedly had PTSD from when she was molested by her grandfather when she was little. And so she would drink a lot, and then she would get really down and cry a lot and talk about all this. And so it's really obvious that she has a lot of issues going on. She was off her drugs, she had PTSD, she was doing like cocaine, so a lot of issues going on that the family was trying to hide at the beginning. Bill, the PI, says that he continues to find out so many things that the family is trying to keep from him as well. And so he's saying, like, why wouldn't you want all the facts out there if you really are trying to find her? And so Fontana confronts Cindy about Christina's past, and Cindy says that Bill is the one that told her about Christina's drug problem. Like, she wasn't even aware of it before she went missing. And she doesn't know who to trust either, because people will tell Bill something and then they'll tell her something else. So it's like nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's lying, and it's just all these stories flying around.
I mean, you were talking about her having like the family lying about her having a drug problem, and she had like some drug debt that maybe she was getting away from. Do you think maybe like the family knew about these drug debts and are hiding her, but are trying to make it like she disappeared? That's what I'm kind of getting at. Like, they're lying about all this stuff because they don't want them to know about her drug problem, but yet maybe they're just trying to throw them off track a bit, just because maybe she did owe people some money and she's in hiding or something.
Yeah, so there's like a lot of theories that go around, and this is like one of the things that people are like, and I'll talk about this too, that there's people that are saying that the family does know where Christina is, and that maybe she's in trouble, so if she does come back, then she's in trouble with the police, or she's in trouble with drug dealers or something. So there is that theory flying around that the family knows for sure where she is, and they're just trying to get attention for whatever reason. So even after all of this, Fontana wants to give Cindy the benefit of the doubt. Like, she's thinking that maybe she's in denial about her daughter's past, and maybe she truly didn't know. And then when she does find out, it's like Cindy doesn't want to put that stigma on her daughter out of fear that people won't try as hard to find her if they know she's a drug addict, which I guess is a totally legit fear. But it just seems like really risky not to reveal those kinds of details to someone that's trying to help you. And so Fontana is still with Cindy at this point, and then Fontana gets another call from Cindy not too long after saying that she thinks that she actually may have found her this time, and Fontana goes along with it. So this time, Cindy has said she's gotten a call from this girl named Patricia who saw the flyer of Christina and recognized her as one of her friends. So this is like years later, that like after Christina originally disappeared. So people are thinking she's living in Peoria and she has like a whole new set of friends that may not know that she's missing. And so when this girl sees the flyer, she thinks it's Christina. And they actually do find Patricia and talk to her. And she talks about how she met Christina like a year and a half ago at a Methodist Behavior Health Center. So I think it's like part of a hospital, like a mental health hospital. And Patricia said that Christina wouldn't talk to anyone else while they were there. She says that Christina was there because of suicidal tendencies. And Patricia said that the police had brought her there, but she hadn't actually been arrested. So there was no actual police record of the incident. So Christina's name wouldn't have been in a police report. And Patricia says that Christina told her that she was actually from Hannibal. And one night she was out drinking with some friends and was walking home from the bar, and she was grabbed from behind and thrown in a trunk. And she continues to say that they drove her around for a bit and then they stopped, and she was brought to a basement where she was sexually assaulted by a couple people. Somebody actually bought her, like purchased her, and then she went back in the trunk, drove a little bit more to another place where she was kept for a couple weeks. She was shot up with heroin, she was assaulted, and then somebody else took her and set her free. And all of this apparently happened in Peoria. Fontana is skeptical about this right away because, for one thing, she says there's no record of Christina being admitted to any hospitals in the area. And, so how could she be at a treatment center without any record of it? And she says that Patricia's story is just eerily similar to Cindy's theory of what happened, that she was like snatched off the street and kept in a basement for prostitution. So maybe that's suspicious, but also maybe that's because that's what happened and there's rumors out there. And that is what happened. So they drop Patricia off at a house on a rural street. And then 30 minutes later, she calls them and is like, oh, I saw Christina in a car. And then Fontana's just like, okay, let's go check it out. So they go back, they pick up Patricia, and then she gets in a truck with Cindy. And Fontana follows behind them in her car. And Patricia says that she saw Christina in a red Ford Taurus car when she was out at the store just a couple minutes ago. And so they drive to the gas station that Patricia saw them at. They're driving around looking for this car, and they actually find a red Ford Taurus. And so a chase ensues, and like Cindy is driving a truck with Patricia, and Fontana and the camera guy are following.
Do they show this chase like in the documentary?
Yeah, the camera guy is sitting in Fontana's car, so they're behind Cindy, so they're like they can see this whole thing going on. And they're trying to chase his car. They're like driving through the city, but it's on the highway, so it's not like super fast, but it seems like Cindy is just kind of driving pretty slow considering what's going on, and there's a traffic light ahead, and the red car goes through the green light. And then when Cindy gets up to the light, it's still green, but instead of going through to chase the car, she takes a left because she has to run into the CVS real quick. And Cindy's like, yeah, I just gotta stop and go into the store and then we can figure out a game plan. And Fontana's like frustrated. She's like, what the fuck? I thought like we were supposed to be chasing this car. Like that was the game plan. She just finds it kind of weird that they have this lead. They think Christina's in this car ahead of them, but then Cindy just pulls off to go to the store. So Fontana's like, yeah, she's like fed up with the bullshit at this point. And that's kind of when she realizes that maybe listening to Cindy is not how this case is going to be solved. And then it's like 3 years into the investigation and Fontana has made like zero progress. And so she finally hires her own private investigators named Ben and John. One of the first things that they dig up is that the family, soon after Christina disappeared, they were on the Steve Wilkos show. Do you guys know what show that is?
It sounds familiar, but...
I do, yeah. It's like a talk show, isn't it? Or like a...
Isn't it like a Maury kind of show?
Somehow it's a trashier version of Jerry Springer. I feel like it's Jerry Springer's old bouncer that made his own show. That's just what I think. Anyway, so...
Wait, so who was on that show?
Christina's family. And it's about Christina's disappearance, and like Cindy's crying on the show, and you know, she's saying she doesn't know if Travis, Christina's boyfriend, had anything to do with the disappearance or not. Travis comes out on the stage and he's like pissed, and they're all yelling at each other. Steve Wilkos is talking about the lie detector that Travis just took, and he basically says that Travis killed Christina. Alex, the stepdad, is like flipping out and yelling. The audience is booing, but they're also cheering. And then Steve yells at Travis. He's like, "Get off my stage." And then Travis runs backstage. The camera guy's chasing him. And then, like, right after the show, Cindy texts Travis like normal, and then they have a barbecue, like, or they have a benefit a few weeks later, and everything is fine.
That's attention seeking right there.
Yeah, Fontana's like, what the hell? And Ben the PI points out, like, it's very odd that Cindy is so convinced that her daughter is alive and in Peoria, but then she goes on this show and, like, basically it's like she's following along with the script.
Is Christina even missing?
I know, right? And that's what the people are starting to think. And it's like, why go on the show and present it like Christina's dead if you think she's not? It could be for attention about the case, but if you're telling people that she's dead, then that's not going to help you find her if you think she's living in the city somewhere.
She could be in their basement.
Yeah, and I mean, they probably got some kind of money to go on the show, I would assume. Like, I don't know who would go on that show for free. Maybe...
Oh yeah, they probably get paid, I would assume.
They probably get something, right? Yeah, or a free trip out of it or something. Anyway, that's like a weird detail that happens, and it's like, that's kind of weird.
Maybe they're doing all this because Christina has that drug debt, and maybe they're trying to get all this money and fame to pay back the money that she owes to those drug dealers.
Yeah, that could be one theory for sure.
So, why is the police not doing anything? Is what I'm confused about.
Like, when I think about this, I think that maybe the police are doing more than we know they're doing. They probably just don't want to speak up about... And, I mean, this is a documentary. Like, not everyone that makes a documentary, like, it doesn't get on, like, a platform for everybody to see, right? So they could just see this as, you know, somebody snooping around with a camera trying to get details. So I can see why the police aren't coming forward and being like, yeah, this is what we're doing, because it's, like, an open investigation. And it's none of their business, kind of. But it's weird that they won't even talk to the PIs about it. And, like, I'll get into this and you'll kind of see why, like, oh, this is, you know, a sketchy situation. So on April 3rd of 2013, Fontana finds out that Christina actually did have a police record. She had been arrested for drinking in public, disorderly conduct, and she had several arrests as a juvenile. And so on her record, she had private peace disturbance, leaving the scene of a motor vehicle accident, and purchase or attempt to purchase or possession of liquor by a minor. So it's very clear that the picture that Cindy was painting of Christina was very different than reality. And, you know, Christina was obviously in trouble. She was going down a bad path pretty young. And so, yeah, like I said, at this point, Fontana distances herself from the family, and she kind of starts to investigate on her own with her two PIs, Ben and John, like I said. They are saying that they have solid witnesses that also claim that they have seen Christina and they know where she is. And Fontana, like, at this point, does feel that Christina is out there, and she just kind of needs help getting herself out of whatever situation she's gotten herself in. And so, a couple weeks later, like April 12th, 2013, Fontana and her two PIs are out on the street trying to follow up on some of these leads that they've gotten from these solid witnesses. They speak to a waitress that says she sees Christina all the time, hanging out at one of the drug houses in the city where prostitutes hang out. And then a local resident who also lives close to that particular house corroborates this, and she says that she sees Christina coming in and out of the house all the time. And another anonymous person comes forward saying that they swear that they saw Christina as well, hanging out around some bad people. And this person wanted to stay anonymous because they were likely scared. There was a murder that had happened like a couple days before this person came forward, and they just didn't want to be a part of any of it, but they just still wanted to help. And so all of these leads are like people that think they see her. They don't actually know Christina, and they don't actually know the person that they claim is Christina. They just think that this person looks very similar to the posters that are out there.
So, sorry, I just had a question. Like, was this, I think you might have said this at the beginning, was this like a super like popular, well-known case at the time? Because I'm thinking like maybe people just want fame and they just want to be like inject themselves into the case if it's like super like popular.
It could have been popular in the city, but like when you search this case, you really don't see like legitimate news sources about it or anything. Like, this is the first thing that I could ever find. There's like blogs and there's like Reddit stuff about it, but there's not like a news or any reliable source other than this that had come out about it. So I don't feel like these people are wanting to inject themselves, and also because a lot of people are like scared to say stuff about these kinds of people because, you know, it's just like that kind of place. But that could be the case as well.
Is this even a real case? Like, was it like, I feel like, was it all made up on that show?
I looked it up too. It was like, is the Christina Whittaker case real? And like, yeah, it is a true story. Like, all this actually happened. Now, like I said, like, a lot of it's probably sensationalized. Like we don't have to talk about how they're going to stake out this apartment building and stuff like that, but it just like brings like this element of like interest to the documentary and kind of just shows you the path these people are going down to try and find her. And the path that they've been going down for years, like it's like 4 years later, and they're still thinking people out on the street are her. Okay, so Fontana and the two PIs are just like watching this house, this apartment complex where people are saying that Christina frequents. And there's people constantly just coming in and out of this house, and they're parked across the street with binoculars, and they think that they see her, and they spot this woman that looks a lot like Christina, and they're like, oh my god, that's her, that's her. This person has a hoodie on, she has like long brown hair. Christina has like dark reddish hair that was long and curly. They think it's her. This is probably the person that people are thinking is her, but it turns out that it's just a girl that looks like her. So it's like another thing that's like, oh, like why did we bother with this? And so a couple weeks later, Fontana checks in again with Cindy, and for whatever reason, Cindy like makes a point to tell her that her PI, Bill, is like going off the wall. He has Alzheimer's, and that she doesn't, like, Fontana shouldn't really believe anything that Bill is saying. And then of course she tells Bill this, and Bill just like laughs it off. And he reveals that he says he wouldn't be surprised if Christina and Cindy are in contact regularly. So this is where that theory comes up, is that like Christina's not really missing, and she, you know, hangs out with her mom all the time.
I just don't understand why you put your family through all of this rigmarole if she wasn't even missing / dead in the first place. Like, what is the whole point of putting your family through all that crap? Like, makes you like a shitty person.
Yeah, like that doesn't make sense about why you would go through all this and bring attention to yourself like that if there was actually nothing wrong, or if you knew where she was and pretending not to. Like, it doesn't make sense.
This case doesn't make sense. I mean, it makes sense, but it's like super convoluted.
I know, it's really hard to like wrap your head around to like figure out what's going on, and like, yeah, like why all this is going on. And so John, the PI, is like contemplating why the police have, it feels like they've stopped looking for Christina as well. And he says that Bill, so the two PIs are talking to each other, Bill told him to be careful with what he's getting into, and Bill says that the lieutenant in Peoria told him directly that Christina had been picked up and she had a huge argument with her mom on the night that she went missing, and that she left, and her mom knows that she left. So this is what the PIs are telling Fontana at this point. And so Fontana sits down with one of Christina's cousins named Rachel, and Rachel says that Christina told her that before she went missing, that once her baby was born, that she was leaving. And then after she went missing, Rachel even went to the police and told them to take the missing posters down because Christina's mother had made this happen, meaning she had made the disappearance happen. And she told the police that Christina was living in Peoria, like that's what she believed. And she says that Christina's mom is, quote, a real nutcase. Rachel reveals that Christina had some sort of relationship with that Darcy guy that I mentioned, Bookie, and that Cindy knew about it, but was trying to keep all that a secret as well. Because, like, this Bookie guy was, like, a drug guy, right? Like, a really dangerous guy. And Cindy was trying to keep that relationship secret. And so Rachel is just really confident that Cindy knows where Christina is, and that Cindy's doing it all to get attention, like we were talking about before. So there are people that are saying this that were in Christina's life, that, yeah, it's totally Cindy just, you know, making shit up.
But, like, wouldn't somebody know that? Like, I feel like, wouldn't somebody, like, if she's living in this place, like, wouldn't somebody... I don't know. Like, it just seems weird that it's, like, just speculation. Like, no one can actually say for sure if they've seen her. And they think, oh, like, I don't know. I just feel like if it's going on this long, somebody would be like, oh, yeah, she's my friend. I see her regularly.
Yeah, and I think that's, like, where all these other leads were coming from. People saying, like, yeah, I know Christina, but nobody could ever follow up with them again, like, to, like, bring me to Christina. And so that's another point that, like, Fontana brings up, too, which is, like, how could Christina be coming back and forth to see her mother and, like, the police not know about it? Like, you'd think they would have some idea. Or maybe they do know, and that's why they're not getting involved, because they know she's fine, and they're just, like, keeping distance from the family because they're crazy.
But wouldn't they say that? Like, wouldn't they come out and say, like, she's fine, it's not a missing persons case? Like, they wouldn't just leave it open
That's true. Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
But I mean, who knows what the police do, but
Maybe they just want to stay out of it altogether. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like if they did know that she was fine, they'd be like, stop looking, like we know where she is, or we've seen her. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Another anonymous person that was involved in the documentary says that Christina's case isn't getting solved because there's too many secrets surrounding Hannibal, and that if this case was to get cracked open, then there's just too many secrets that would be revealed about the people and everything that's going on in Hannibal. So it's like this like ominous overtone of like they can't solve it because of what's going to be revealed if they do.
creepy.
Yeah. So I mean, at this point, it's like 4 or 5 years in, and like nobody is any further ahead than they were before. And so other people are also saying that Christina's living in Peoria and she still visits Hannibal, and they know that because they've talked to her. So yeah, like other people have come forward and be like, yeah, I talk to her all the time. And some say that she's living in a motel and that she would just walk down the street to visit her parents. But it's like none of these people are able to be like, yeah, I'll go get her or anything. Like nobody ever comes forward to do that. People were saying that all the benefits that the family was having to raise money for the searches, they were just a scam to raise money for themselves because they already knew where Christina was. And some people said that they heard that Christina was hiding in Peoria because her family was threatening her. If she was to come back, then she'd be in trouble. So it's like, I don't know, there's so many different, like families involved, they're not involved, they can find her, they don't know where she is, but they do know where she is, or like there's drug debts. So there's like all this stuff going on.
I feel like the family has to be involved somehow. What's that saying? It's like if there's smoke, there's fire. Like there's just too much stuff circulating. Like there's too many weird coincidences for them to be completely innocent, I feel.
Yeah. And like the town, I feel it's like not huge and everybody knows everybody. So it's not like the family's completely in the dark, right? You'd think they would know. They definitely know more than what they're saying at the very least. And like Fontana finally figures this out. That's why she kind of distances herself and doesn't listen to Cindy all the time, because maybe she is just distraught and doesn't want to, you know, go down that road. And she thinks that her daughter is fine, or she's making it all up. I don't know. See, at this point, I'm still like, I don't know what's happening.
Although I have to give it to the filmmaker. Like if that were me, I would have been like, fuck this, fuck these people. Like I'm out.
I know. And that's what she does say, is she's like, so many people have gotten involved and started, and once they realize like the shitstorm ahead of them, they all leave. But she had promised, before she knew all this, like she promised Cindy's family that she wouldn't stop. And she's like, I didn't say that saying that like, oh, I'm only going to help you if, you know, you're good people, or I'm only going to help Christina if, you know, you don't get arrested or you don't do drugs. Like she's like, I didn't say that, and I would never say that because Christina's still missing.
Or is she?
Yeah, though at this point they think that she still is anyway. Well, Fontana does.
Yeah, I feel like Fontana, like, she's probably the only person, maybe the other PIs, that are actually going to come down to the bottom and find actually what is going on. Because the family, sure as hell, won't tell you. But I feel like she's the only person, besides the police, because they seem to be no help either, she's going to be the one that finds what's going on in this case, I feel like. It's her mission to keep going, because she wants to know, maybe for herself. Nobody else that's confused.
Mm-hmm. Like she does get so invested in this that she's just like, I feel like I just have to do it. And I think that's part of the problem with this case and cases like this is like the police aren't with you or helping you, and so you have to talk to everybody, and everybody has their own version of the story, or they make stuff up because they don't want you to find out what's going on. So like in a town like this, it's just like those rumors are just running rampant, and it's kind of crazy.
I think the police are in cahoots with the Barons. That's where I'm at right now. I don't know. The police just seem like kind of like, I don't know, stupid. Or like either like, I don't know, stupid or like uninterested or just like
lazy, like yeah, too much work.
Or maybe they're in this drug ring of themselves and they don't want to be caught in the middle of like someone finding out like they're part of the drug ring too.
Yeah, corruption. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so Fontana continually tries to contact people in Christina's life, like the woman that she went out with that night named Breezy won't return her calls. People won't answer her when she calls or knocks on their door. People have moved, like new phone numbers. She can't find anybody. She was trying to get into contact with the guy who found Christina's phone, that Danny guy. She was trying to get in contact with him for like 3 years. And he was actually a sex offender and was involved with drugs. He was apparently like a really weird, unsociable guy, but she even goes to his house and like knocks on his door, and she can't get a hold of him. And so he never comes forward, never talks to her or probably anybody about this, and he died in 2017 without ever talking to Fontana about the case. However, Danny's ex-wife a woman named Janet comes forward and says that Christina had come over to Danny's house that night she disappeared, also with a guy named Josh. And apparently Christina must have called them for a ride after she got kicked out of all those bars. And they came to pick her up, and she says that apparently they hit her with their car, maybe by accident, and she was bleeding from her head and she couldn't really function or anything, and so they threw her in the back of Josh's truck. And then Josh asked Danny to help him get rid of her in the river. And apparently Danny said he wouldn't have anything to do with that, but who knows? And so this Josh guy, he got a new car 2 weeks later. Josh denies any involvement, and he was never actually a suspect. Like, they don't talk to him on the documentary at all. His name just comes up. So it's like another theory that is happening. Like, he's the one that hit that parked car and actually hit Christina. And then she dropped her phone, and then they put her in the trunk of the car. And, well, maybe she didn't drop her phone. They took her phone because they hit her.
But did they know those details? Like, were those details out publicly known? Or did they just kind of, like, is this possible they just came up with that story to match details that they had heard about?
So it was, like, known that somebody hit a parked car right where her phone was found. Like, people just know that. And probably because the owner of that car was like, somebody fucking hit my car. And, like, they know that's where the phone was found, or apparently was found. So, like, that's common knowledge. So it was, like, the police never, like, went any further into that theory, though. So whether they think it wasn't related or didn't happen, or whether this person's just making it up, like, that never comes out. It's never revealed. Like, this lead doesn't go anywhere. Let's just put it that way. So there's also this other man named Archie, and he is a family friend of Cindy's, and he has been helping with the search for Christina since the beginning. And in May of 2016, he was in jail for dealing meth, and he met somebody while he was in jail that claimed to have information about Christina. And this guy's name was Anthony. Anthony's story is that he is Bookie's cousin. So we talked about Bookie before. So Anthony and Bookie are first cousins. And Bookie admitted to Anthony that he was the one that killed Christina. Anthony said that he was with Darcy when they took Christina from Hannibal to Peoria. They apparently picked her up and kept her for a few days and then took her to Peoria. And when they asked where she was now, Anthony allegedly just said she's gone. Like, leave it alone, she's gone. And Fontana calls the police to tell them that she has info on who took Christina that night. And the officer she talks to was just like, oh, I'm not the one in charge of the case, I'll pass the message along. And then 7 months later, like, nobody follows up in terms of interviewing Anthony about that. So what I just said before, that was coming from another guy that said Anthony told him this about this other guy. So then she finally talks to Anthony, and so he reiterates the same kind of similar story. He says he met Christina outside the bar that night, and he says that Christina was actually Bookie's girlfriend. So I don't know if that's true, obviously. And then Anthony says that he received a letter in the mail from Bookie saying that Christina was dead, and he said that Bookie says that Christina wouldn't cooperate with him, and that he knocked her teeth out, and then Bookie and some friends took her body out to a pig farm to dispose of it. Anthony said that Bookie was already facing murder charges for a different crime, so that's why he was just, like, confessing to this one as well. And Anthony says that he threw out that letter, though, so he doesn't actually have it.
Who the fuck would throw out that letter?
Yeah.
Like, if you get that letter, like, you keep it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, he later says that, like, he was, like, scared of Bookie, right? Because he was really violent, and Bookie said, if you ever tell anybody about any of this, you know, the same thing's going to happen to you. But why write him a letter with all these details? And Anthony says that his girlfriend found the letter and said that, well, if somebody finds this on you, then you're going to get charged with the same thing, so you might as well get rid of it. And so he does. Apparently, like, all of this happened to Christina after she was in Peoria for a little bit already. Like, she got murdered after she was already staying in Peoria, so people that said they saw her after she disappeared, you know, that so could have been legit. Anthony says that it seems like not out of the ordinary for Bookie because he was a very violent person. Like, he beat and stabbed his wife before, so I wouldn't be surprised if he did do this. And he had also beat a girlfriend before, a former girlfriend, when he found out that she had talked to the U.S. Marshal, maybe about Christina's case or a different case, I'm not sure. But he found out that she had talked to the U.S. Marshal. And, like, while he was beating this other woman, he said that she was going to end up just like Christina. So she also tells, like, this similar story about how he told her that he had beat Christina up got her on heroin, sold her for prostitution, but then Christina started to fight back, and that's why he had to kill her and get rid of her on that pig farm.
What is this case? I feel like there's 4 different, like, cases going on in this one episode. Like, I don't
It just seems like nobody actually knows what happened, and there's a rumor, and then somebody just like goes with it and then says, yeah, that's what I heard, that's what I saw too. And it doesn't make sense. Like, when you put it all together, like, all of these things, why are so many people saying these different things? Like, it really doesn't make sense.
It almost seems like it's like a planned effort. Like, it's everyone's in on it together, and it's a planned effort to like confuse everyone so no one actually knows what's happening.
Yeah, and like I mentioned before, like, people in that town kind of, they all work together to keep their secrets safe. So maybe it is just this big, huge plan. And I mean, it could be. You never know.
Like, did they know that this person was in town making this documentary? Like, they must know. And they're like, oh, maybe it's in their mind, like, oh, this would make, I don't know. Like, they're kind of like, oh, this will make a documentary super interesting too. Like, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to dramatize it themselves and they just want a piece of it or something.
I don't know, but I don't know why you would say stuff about these obviously dangerous people if it wasn't true. Like, some people are scared. A lot of people are on there, they're talking, but like, they're anonymous, like their voice and their face are all blurred out because they don't want people to know who they are. So I feel like people aren't going to come forward and say something about a specific person and like specific details so you would know who said it.
Yeah, that's true.
If it wasn't true, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like us really dangerous thing to do. So it's kind of, I don't understand why all these different stories.
Like, if they're anonymous, then they feel like, oh, I can say anything then because no one knows who I am, so then I can like say all these things even if they're not true.
But that's like kind of the thing. It's like all these anonymous people are saying all this anonymous stuff, and it's like, well, who's saying what and why, and is it true? And like, it just makes it more confusing.
I feel like this is why the police, in situations like this is what they get down to the bottom of it. Like, they go and look out for those leads. They go and like those rumors, but like, I feel like the police have done nothing. So everybody's just circulating all these rumors and going on and on and on because there's no like upper hand, I guess. Nobody's looking into any of this. So it's like they can say whatever they want because nobody's going to really make them accountable for what they're saying.
Well, yeah. And it also makes you think like, well, that's why the police aren't getting involved because there's so much stuff going on. Like, they don't even know what's true and what's not true, so they don't want to say anything because they just don't even know either. So that could be a reason why, you know, you think maybe they're not coming forward either. So it's just a lot of stuff to kind of wrap your head around. Like I was saying, like, after this woman went to the police and she said, this woman that I talked about before that Buki had beaten up, she went to the police and she said that she wanted to make a statement, and the officer she talked to was just like, well, nobody's going to read your statement anyway. So it's like, okay, like, thanks for your help. In 2018, Fontana finally gets a chance to talk with Buki, and like, he's in prison, 25 to life for beating a man with a 2x4 and killing him. So he's finally willing to talk to her.
Does this kid, sorry, I just need to know, does this have a resolution?
We'll see.
Like, do we know what happens?
We'll see. So she talks to Buki and says, like, when she first starts to talk to him, Buki's like, oh yeah, I've heard of Christina, but I don't really know her. And he says that people just assume that he would know about it because he's from Peoria, and he's like, just knows stuff. He talks about how he messed up because he just couldn't keep his hands to himself. And like, as he's talking and saying all this stuff, like, he has this little smirk on his face, which is like really uncomfortable to watch. You're just like, what are you fucking smiling about? And then Buki denies being at the bar with Christina, and he denies writing that letter. He denies having anything to do with it, and he doesn't know where she is, but he says that he heard that, yeah, she left Hannibal to get away from her mom. And he said he didn't know Christina, but he talks about how he talked to Christina's mother back in 2013, telling her that he had nothing to do with it. And so he obviously knew who they were. And there was also a photo of him, a photo of Buki, in Cindy's photo album with all the pictures of Christina. So, yeah, that stuck out as weird as well. So people are obviously lying like it's their one and only job.
That's a good line.
So Breezy, that woman that was out with Christina at the bar that night, she claims that Buki was Christina's drug dealer and that he would travel from Peoria to Hannibal to deliver her drugs. And he did that the night she went missing. So she puts Buki with Christina that night as well. she says that he delivered her some cocaine, and Christina and Breezy did a line together in the bathroom at the bar that night. And so a lot of signs are pointing at Bookie, but there's no like solid proof, or really any proof at all that any of the PIs can get their hands on that he was actually involved. It's just hearsay from different people. Bookie himself is, denying everything. So there's nothing solid at this point. Still, nothing solid.
How many years after she went missing is this now?
9?
This is in 2018 that she finally talks to Bookie. So yeah, this is 9 years.
That's so crazy.
9 years, and she's nowhere still. Like, that's what I said before when people are like, she's horrible at this. Like, why is it taking her this long? She's not an investigator, and she's, there's so much crap to deal with when talking to these people, obviously. There's no way to get a straight story out of anybody.
I would have been out 8 years earlier, so...
Okay, so yeah, like I said, this is like 9 years later, and there's still no real breaks in the case, except for like what I've already discussed. And, obviously some stories seem more plausible than others, but obviously there's no way all of them are true, because some people say she's still alive and some people say she's dead. So it's like there's obviously either people are thinking like it's mistaken identity, they actually think they saw her trying to help, or they're making stuff up, or she's not actually dead. So, I mean, really no further along than we were. So earlier when I had talked about how Hannibal used to be like a really welcoming place, and eventually went downhill, well, obviously I don't know the exact history of when things started to unravel, but Hannibal has been a hub for organized crime for close to like a century and a half, for about 150.
I'd say so.
Yeah, but I mean for a long time, like almost 200 years, like 150 years. There have been groups that are tied to like immigrants from Eastern Europe called the Romani, and there's a subgroup of this group known as the Romnichil, and these people settled in Hannibal. So when I say Romnichil, you probably have no clue what I'm talking about. And basically they're, when you hear the word gypsy, and like gypsy is actually a derogatory term, which I didn't know, but they are like these gypsy sort of people. They have like their own set of rules, they have their own traditions, they have their own language, and they kind of try very hard not to associate with outsiders. And so that was kind of the people that were living in Hannibal 150 years ago. And of course, a lot of the descendants from that group are people that are still in Hannibal.
Oh my god, all these people are gypsies. Is that the twist?
Yeah, it's just a gypsy group, yeah.
Actually, gypsy. I can't say gypsy. I guess that is derogatory, but...
Yeah, I didn't know that. But yeah, so let's just get this group. And a lot of the people that are from like these families, like the Romnichil, have like integrated into society. Like they're not outsiders anymore. But, but many of them still have like their own little criminal enterprises, and they range from like fraud to big time drug trafficking. And the documentary was saying like a lot of people know who the mafia are, and obviously these families aren't as big as the mafia, but that's kind of like, they're like these organized crime families in Hannibal. So apparently people that are still involved with these crime families, they're super dangerous, and a lot of them are like ruthless criminals. And so one of their best well-known scams in the area is like posing as asphalt contractors and then conning people out of thousands of dollars, and they're known as the asphalters. And it's just like a fact that everybody knows about them, but somehow they're still able to con thousands of dollars out of people. And so Fontana teams up with some professionals that have experience actually working in Hannibal with these groups. And so she starts working with a former FBI agent named Steve Gomez and Gina Bradshaw, who is she was a former sergeant detective, but she's still involved in law enforcement, and Marina Malone, who's retired from the FBI as well. And so all of these people have experience in Hannibal, and they have experience investigating the Romnichil crime families, so they know a lot about them. And she wanted to talk to them because there was a man's name that kept coming up throughout all of her investigations, and this guy's name was Glenn Ledbetter, and he was another sex offender living in Hannibal, and he was a really dangerous guy who was also suspected of another murder in 1999 of a man named Dale, who disappeared and no one ever saw again, but they figured that this guy did it. He was an asphalter, but he was like the top asphalter, so in like the hierarchy, it was like this Glenn guy was at the top. And there were rumors that Christina had been thrown down a well on his property. So Fontana finds out over the years that some of these people that she's not working with have tried to get warrants to search properties, but because everyone is so close in the community, like even the police officers, there's always a leak that gets out there, and somehow everybody knows everything and like what's coming, and so they're never able to get a chance to go out and investigate these properties or any of these leads. And they also warn Fontana to be like very careful about who she's going out to talk to regarding like these asphalters and these crime families. And she says that she feels like she's being followed, and they're like, oh yeah, like you are for sure, so just like watch out. So Gina Bradshaw, who I just mentioned, she had put some of the asphalters in jail over the years, and so she learned, it seemed like what happened to Christina is kind of like an open secret within the community of asphalters. It's like everybody knows what happens, but no one's ever going to say anything about it. And Gina is actually able to talk to a Romnichil elder on the phone, and this person's obviously anonymous, and he says that yes, Christina is still in the Hannibal area. Of course, she's not alive. Okay, so we were talking about like all these conspiracies that maybe police are involved in drugs and everything. Well, there's actually a lot of talk that the police officers, like the ones from Hannibal, are actually corrupt as well. And some of them are actually involved with the asphalters. And one former officer who came from outside Hannibal to work there, he was told, kind of warned, like, don't work there, like, you don't want to be in that situation. He was told that by other police officers who knew what was going on there. So apparently, at least 3 police officers have been accused of having sexual relationships with Christina. And, like, this started even before she was, like, legal. She was only 17. And that it was a law enforcement official who introduced Christina to cocaine. And like her mother even corroborates this, even though her mother said she never did drugs, but then she says that yeah, it was the police that got her involved in drugs. And there were allegations that even on-duty officers would attend parties with teenagers, they would do drugs, and they would all sleep together, and that these officers kind of had a grudge against these people ever since, and some of them still work at the Hannibal Police Department. And allegedly there was an officer there who would let teenage girls off on their charges if, you know, they would do sexual favors for him. So, like, this stuff was happening within the police department.
I just can't with this case. Like, I don't...
Called it. I knew it was the police.
Yeah, like, I said that at the beginning.
Right? I know. Like, yeah, they're involved with the asphalters, probably getting money, working with them, like, not arresting them. And yeah, like, doing drugs and hanging out with underage kids. It's just not a good scene. And no wonder nobody wants to come forward. Like, they can't even trust the police. So I can see why there's just like this fucking shit show. So Cindy, Christina's mother, her maiden name is Elzies, and the Elzies family are actually big time asphalters. So Cindy says that Christina was half Elzie and half Whittaker, and so neither of those are good names in Hannibal. So you don't want to have one of those as your last name, and she was kind of associated with both. And so she says she thinks that she just wasn't important enough for police to look at her disappearance properly. And so maybe her family was an asphalter, but sometimes, like, apparently the asphalters were like this one big group, this one big family, but they would often like conflict with each other. So it was like one group of asphalters doing something against the other group of asphalters. So it's just like this big, messy, like, family affair. And so when you like put all this in perspective, you can see that like this was Christina's whole life. She was like around these dangerous people. And apparently not too long before she went missing, she had gotten a fight with her brother, and he actually like knocked her teeth out, and she had to go to the emergency room. And her parents put her up in a hotel so that she wouldn't press charges. And Fontana points out that it seems like the family was protecting Brian over her. Like, he beat her up to the point where she had to go to the hospital. But they let him stay with them, and they kick her out and banish her to a hotel. And Brian, like, never would talk to anybody about Christina's case, would never talk to Fontana, and Cindy said, like, he won't talk to them about her either. So it's like this mysterious figure that is Brian. So just like violence throughout, just like drugs, violence, crime family, and that was Christina's upbringing. So it's a very different picture than what was painted of her at the beginning. And there's like home videos. Like, Cindy provided Fontana with just like hours, like 400 hours or something of just like home videos. And, you know, Fontana finds home videos of members of Cindy's family doing drugs. Like, they're on screens like smoking crack, and Cindy's the one that's like recording. She's like, oh, and now I have you on camera, like, and then Christina's in those videos too, so like she was just like around this her whole life. And so that's just kind of like more background on that. And so back in 2015 there was a tip to search Glenn Ledbetter's property, so he was like that top asphalter guy, but because he denied police access to his property, they didn't search it, and that was kind of the end of it. And so in March of 2018, Fontana gets access to the woods and the property that are behind and around Glenn Ledbetter's property. Like, he doesn't own it, but it's just the property that's there. And so she brings out like a search dog and a professional out there to see if they can sniff anything out. And the dog is like super pumped, and he's running around, and he does hit on something in the woods. There's like this one area with a big log. But while they're out there searching, this guy pulls up on an ATV. And he's like, like, what are you doing? This is actually like Glenn Ledbetter's property. You're not supposed to be here. Private property. And so they kind of get like scared and they leave without doing anything else at that point. But a deputy from the Hannibal Police Department actually finally agrees to like cooperate with Fontana. They never like speak on camera, but she goes into the police department and talks to them. And they agree that, this could be like an actual lead. And so they bring more dogs out to the area. And they go back to that property, and they said that's actually not Glenn's property, so whoever told you that is like just trying to get you away from there probably. And so they bring out another cadaver dog, and that dog hits on the same spot that the other dog did. And so they're all excited, and then 2 weeks later the police say that they have gone back out and done ground penetrating radar in the area, and they're like, oh, there's nothing out there. So, that's it, and we can't share the report with you because it's an ongoing investigation. And so Fontana and her crew go back out there because they're like, well, the police basically said, like, we're done. And they actually find pieces of bone. And they find what looks like a restraint that you would, like, tie somebody up with. And they find this wire. It looks like it has, like, loopholes in it. Like, kind of like a garrote where you could use it to, like, strangle somebody from behind. And so while they're digging and they're getting all the stuff in bags, like, they hear ATVs coming closer again. So they just grab all the shit and they get out of there. And so what they do is they have all this stuff and they hand it over to Hannibal police. And when she goes in there, there's not like one single police officer in there, like the whole office. There's just some dude sitting behind a desk, and he's like, yeah, I gave it to me and I'll put it in the mailbox for the lieutenant. For January 2019, this is like almost a whole year later, they still haven't heard anything back. Like, they will not return Fontana's calls about the evidence that they submitted. It's just like nothing. And of course they're getting frustrated. Like, they almost feel like they have like the murder weapon and like bones. And then finally, Gina, who I said was like a lieutenant that worked in law enforcement, she talks to the Hannibal police officer who wanted to cooperate at first. So this person's name was Lieutenant Grody. And she told them that they talked to the FBI about what they found and that the conclusion was that it was all junk and to just throw it out. But then Gina talks to the county prosecutor, and she tells Gina that the Hannibal police officer, so Lieutenant Grody, said that the FBI told her to throw it out, but she actually kept it anyway and that she was going to get it tested. But there's no record of that. She just said she did it. And when they try to get more info out of an anonymous like officer inside the Hannibal Police Department, that source says that the items have been analyzed for DNA, but there's zero report about it. And then the source mentioned that there's a secret file, but it's not really a secret file. It's just like a system that they use to like keep confidentiality. So I guess it was like you're doing stuff and it could involve another like police officer, you might have like its own separate file so that not anybody can just get into the database. But that inside source can't find any further information on it because it's not written in any report anywhere. And the only reason he knows that it was submitted was because that's what Officer Grody told him. But I mean, it's been at least a year since it was submitted and nothing's come of it. So he's like, well, what the hell? Okay, so now it's 10 years since Fontana got involved. And so I guess after 10 years, police files can be made available to the public, even in open cases. At least that's the law in Missouri. So Fontana finally gets her hand on all these files, and they start looking through them to see, you know, what are the gaps about what they've been told, what the police know, and what they can fill in.
She should have just waited 10 years. And then she has all this stuff without going down all those false leads or whatever.
I know, right? So when they're looking at all these files, like, it looks like in the beginning, it seems like the police did talk to a lot of people, but they never, like, followed up or followed through on anything. And they never interviewed Christina's family. Like, they didn't talk to her brother, they didn't talk to her father, they didn't talk to Cindy. Like, that's the first thing. Usually when somebody goes missing, you investigate the family.
Although I guess you can't really trust with the police files. Like, all the police are corrupt. Like, I guess there's not the best source to go to.
Yeah, and I mean, they're finding that these police files really aren't much more help than what they already knew. There are names of people that Fontana was trying to find out about, people that would talk like, oh, this person said this or this person knows this, but no one would name names because they didn't want to get in trouble. But she's saying those names weren't included in the police records either. Like, nobody kept those kinds of records naming actual people. And there was no follow-ups about any of the items that were submitted for evidence. And so also there was like info in the file that seemed to suggest that Christina would do work for the police department, like find stuff out about people so that they would have enough to do search warrants. And she would provide info so that they would let her off on charges. And like, this is legal, right? This is like what a confidential informant would do kind of thing. And so Fontana is able to talk to someone that had come forward to Hannibal police who claims that he knows what happened to Christina and why. And he said this person says it happened because she was involved with the Hannibal police department. So the person that's saying this, he's in jail, and he's saying that he's getting this info from another inmate and a prison guard. And he's saying that she was killed because she told something about someone, and then she got set up and basically lured to this place and killed. And the police put her in this situation. And while they maybe didn't like intend for her to get killed, like, it was because of them that she was kind of in that situation. And maybe they're just trying to cover it up or cover their ass for whatever reason. And this source seems to be like one of the most legit yet. And they follow up on a tip that Christina was buried along the Mississippi River in Illinois. And Fontana and Gina, they're all like talking about getting search dogs out there and trying to find the exact place to look. And so they are actually able to confirm through court records, because it wasn't in police records that Christina was a confidential informant, but they were able to confirm through court records that yes, she actually did work as a CI. But for whatever reason, like, Hannibal police still denies it. And Gina reveals that a source told her that another CI that was working for the Hannibal Police Department was told by a police officer to stay away from Christina because she probably was wearing a wire. And like Gina says, this is like a super dangerous thing for a police officer to do, because now another CI knows who another CI is. So the word just probably got out that Christina was an informant. Christina's mom claims that she knew about Christina being a CI as well. But she only ever comes forward with this when she's confronted, when she's like being questioned by someone on Fontana's team. And so they feel like they're finally getting somewhere. Like, they actually have real, like, solid evidence from these court documents that Christina was involved with the Hannibal Police Department. And like, Christina's mom corroborates that she knew that Christina was having like sexual relationships with police officers in the police department.
But can they trust the courts either? Like, I wouldn't be trusting any of the court documents either. Like, all the judges and all the people in the court are probably corrupt too.
I don't know. I feel like you gotta trust somebody. I don't know. They feel like they could trust these court documents because not everybody's corrupt. Like, they were talking to another cop that had worked there, and he said, like, you know, when he first started, it was like there was a lot of good people, and then kind of like police chiefs got moved around, and then they started manipulating or like pushing out all the good guys. It went as high up as like at least the police chief and then the officers. I think it's hard to believe that like the courts and higher up would be involved, but you know, who knows? At this point, they feel like they have solid reason to believe that Christina was working as a CI, and that it probably got her killed because, you know, somebody said something they shouldn't have and they found out and somebody killed her.
So to clarify, so she was a CI, like she was working with the police, or she against the police?
No, she was working with them. So apparently she had some sort of like charge, and they said, you know, if you want to get rid of this, then this is what you can do. You know, you can be a CI. And so she decided to go for it. And they show her like her signature on the documents and stuff saying like, yeah, like I agreed to all this stuff. So it wasn't just like, yeah, you're a CI. It was like a formal thing. So it was legit as far as anybody knows. And so, okay, so they finally go out to that spot along the river that I was talking about earlier. So the sheriff in that county is involved as well. Like and this is in Illinois, and he's cooperating with them. And they have cadaver dogs out there. And then the dogs hit on this spot, and they find like this old burnt out fridge that's up in the wooded area. And forensic teams are out there, and they get like the crime scene tape up and everything, and they're going to look inside this fridge, see if there's anything in there. They open it up, and there's nothing in there. It's just an old burnt fridge. And then they get out a backhoe and they start digging around the area, but they still find nothing. And now it's April of 2021, not that long ago. Fontana sends the Hannibal Police Department a list of over 80 questions that she still has about this case that she just wants answers. And like she's like, this is her chance for them to like write out exactly what they want to say. And nobody ever replies back. And this was just in April of 2021, so I'm not sure if anything has changed since then. And I mean, Fontana requests to talk to someone in the Hannibal Police Department on camera for the past 11 years, and nobody has still ever come forward to talk to her. And so a former Hannibal police officer comes forward and confirms that, yes, like as we already confirmed, there was corruption in the police department for sure. And in order for that, like anything to change in Hannibal, you'd have to get like the Department of Justice involved and like higher ups to come and investigate the department for anything to ever change. And so May 15th, 2021, they are talking again to another or the same Romney Chill elder who they had talked to before. And he's talking and he says that when they were out on the property looking before, like out by the creek, they were very close to Christina's body. And they said that used to be Glenn Ledbetter's property. And he's saying again that Christina's body was dumped in a well and it's about 200 or 250 feet from the road. And Glenn no longer owns that property. But the current owners would not let the producers of this documentary access to that well without a substantial compensation. So it was probably like, give me an absurd amount of money if you want to come and check. And Fontana was still trying to find other witnesses to like corroborate what this person was saying so that it would give law enforcement enough evidence to get a warrant to go out there and search. That's where it ends. And Christina's still missing. There's still like all these loose ends out there. They feel like maybe they have finally figured out that she's in this well on the property, but nobody can get there because this guy won't let them on his property.
So no resolution.
The end.
Oh my god.
No, there's no resolution. And like this just came out a few months ago, so I mean there still could be stuff that's happening, but I mean there's nothing new.
So if it was that guy's property, Glenn Ledbetter, whatever the fuck his name is, if that is his property, like, okay, so he's the top police chief or top police guy, right? So he killed her.
No, he's not the policeman.
Oh, there's so many fucking people in this story.
He used to be an asphalter.
Oh,
the top asphalter, and it used to be his property. It's not anymore.
So if she is in that well, that means he probably killed her. She's on his old property, so that means. But like, there's still no motive. So even if they know it is him, like, how do they prove that it was him and why?
Yeah. And I mean, like, I don't even know if they think that he did it. He could have been involved, but it still could be like reasonable to think that maybe that other guy, like Bookie or somebody, killed her. And because he was like one of the big drug guys, he knew Glenn Ledbetter and they disposed of her together, or like that kind of thing. So maybe not every part of the piece is like can be dismissed. Like maybe it all comes together and different people are involved, and this is just kind of like the end.
So her mother could have been involved.
I don't know. Like at the end, she is like still really upset, and she still thinks like she's like, I'll never believe that Christina's dead. Like she still thinks that she's alive out there. She's like, I'll still hand out flyers in Peoria. Like I feel like she's still out there. So she's in denial that Christina's dead. I don't know. I feel like, and that's like I said before, like this documentary kind of paints her and her family in a bad light. And like, I mean, I'm not saying they're perfect people. She does seem like to be actually concerned about her daughter. And I feel like she doesn't know. I feel like...
How do you explain all of her shady behavior? Like they're literally in hot pursuit of this car and I'm just going to stop into this store for a while. Like that's like, you can, like, I mean, how does the documentary paint that in any other way? Like it happened. It doesn't look good.
No, it doesn't look good. I know. I don't know. Like, I can't explain that kind of thing. Maybe she just didn't feel like it was like as big as a lead as she was letting on that it was. Maybe she knew who was in that car and was like, okay, I'm not chasing them because they'll probably kill me later or something, but just didn't want to admit that.
Oh yeah, that's possible too.
Anyway, so what would your guys' final conclusions be, like, if you can make sense of any of this?
I'm gonna say she's still alive. I feel like she's still out there. Maybe she's in hiding. Maybe she's still in Hannibal, but nobody's saying anything. Should be at somebody's house. I don't know. I don't think she's dead. I feel like somebody's hiding her and she's still out there.
It's funny. You thought that about the last one too. Emma Philippoff one. You said that she was still out there. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's so confusing. There's so many people. I would say she's probably dead. if I had to choose, or if I had to like pick a theory, but it's like so confusing that I don't even know. Like I have nothing to back up why I think she's dead. Like, you know, like I can't even make sense of it.
The reason why I think she's still alive is because there's so many lies going around of who saw what and who did what to her, and I feel like nobody really knows what really went on.
There's like nothing to support that she's still alive. Like, I don't know, to me, I feel like I'd accept her mother thinking that she is. But I feel like it seems more plausible that, like, you know, that possible murder weapon they found, and then like this lead that they think she's in that well, like that seems the most legit. But also there's been other leads that have turned into nothing, so who knows.
Yeah, and I actually think like that the Romnichil elder guy that they're talking to, who's in jail, I feel like he's, and it's probably just because I watched the documentary and like know kind of, I feel like I know these people, but it's like he's the one that said that she was a confidential informant, and that actually wasn't in the police documents anywhere, and he knew that. They had to go higher up to the courts to get that kind of information, and he was like, this guy's in jail, and he's like, I've done a lot of things in my life, so I feel like I need to finally come clean on a few things, and like he knows stuff, so he's like, I'm just gonna tell what I know. And so I feel like he doesn't have anything to gain by like ratting people out.
I feel like with a case like this, like there's been so many people who have said things, or oh, I think this happened, or I know this happened, that have turned into nothing, that it's like, I feel like I wouldn't trust any lead that comes out unless it's like confirmed that they found her body. But like other than that, like anything short of that, like I'm not gonna believe anything.
Yeah, it still could come out that none of this is true, and like they've actually just been chasing, you know, this false narrative for 12 years.
Could be the filmmaker. No, I'm just kidding. Like,
yeah, it turns out that the documentary's not even true.
yeah, like no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, who knows?
Anyway, yeah. So like this is something I'm definitely gonna like keep looking into, because I feel like I'm invested now, and like I need to find out what happened to Christina.
Yeah, and it's still really recent too, so like there's a big possibility that there could be, you know, more updates coming out relatively soon. So yeah, I need to know how this ends for sure. So I hope we find out.
Yeah, and I mean the only reason it's over kind of is because like they released a documentary, but because like they're kind of at this like stall where they can't get onto this guy's property, and they're not going to be able to unless they get more evidence against him. So it's like,
why don't they just pay that guy the money? Like I'm sure they made a lot in the documentary. Like just pay him that money. It could be done.
Maybe before they like release it, they didn't have a lot of money, because I mean Fontana was paying for like the PIs and stuff all out of her own pocket. Like this wasn't like this was just kind of like a side project for her. It wasn't her whole life. And so she's like, this whole process is draining me mentally and like financially. So she was putting a lot of her own, and they said substantial. I'm thinking like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like no one is just going to hand that over, right? So
yeah, I mean they should take that money they made from going on Maury or whatever that fucking show was, put that money together.
That's probably gone. That was like 11 years ago.
Yeah, and it probably wasn't that much either.
No, there's no way it would be that much. So yeah, that's the Christina Whittaker case. It'll keep you updated if anything comes out of it.
Crazy. What a wild ride.
It really was.
It was good. I was actually not talking as a whole lot because I was actually invested in trying to figure out like what happened to this person.
Yeah, it's almost like too much to like even talk about, because you don't even know what to talk about.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you next week. You can find us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at Crime Family Podcast. We have an email address, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com, and we also have Twitter, crimefamilypod1. So yeah, so you can reach out to us with tips or case ideas, anything you want. We love hearing from you. So see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.